Winter dusk comes early in Boston. As snow began to dance outside the window, Carol Hamilton sat at her kitchen table facing the numbers in her ledger. In the quiet room where only the sound of the calculator echoed, her slender fingers continued to press the keys with precision. "Mom, I'm hungry." Tommy had returned from school. Carol looked up from her numbers and smiled at her son. Her tired face softened in an instant. "Welcome home, Tommy. How was school today?" The small 6-year-old boy happily began telling stories of his adventures on the playground. Carol stood up, took out leftovers from the previous night from the refrigerator, and began warming them. The dark circles under her eyes and the wrinkles on her forehead told the story of the burden she carried. Carol had been working at a small accounting firm for 10 years. On weekdays, she worked at the office from 9 to 5, handled accounting work at home in the evenings, and on weekends, she worked part-time as a cashier at a supermarket. As a single mother raising her son, she couldn't afford the luxury of rest. "Tommy, Grandma and Grandpa said they're going to call tomorrow." The boy's expression clouded slightly. "About Aunt Rebecca's wedding?" Carol nodded. Her sister Rebecca had just recently gotten engaged to Michael Dawson, a successful young entrepreneur. Their parents were overjoyed with this news and were immersed in planning a lavish wedding. The Hamilton family ran a well-known real estate company in the suburbs of Massachusetts. Her parents, who had built a wealthy lifestyle by developing and selling luxury homes one after another, adored Rebecca. Having graduated from a prestigious university and working in her parents' company, Rebecca had always been their pride.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with redditstories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Meanwhile, Carol had chosen her own path after high school, foregoing college. She had big dreams at the time. However, branded as having betrayed the family's expectations, her relationship with them gradually became distant. Now, they only met a few times a year on special occasions. "Mom, why are Grandpa and Grandma always angry?" Tommy innocently asked. Carol gently stroked her son's hair and answered, "They're not angry. It's just that Mom didn't choose the path they wanted." But that was Mom's choice. She didn't say it, but her relationship with Tommy's father had also added fuel to her parents' anger. The partner she chose after giving up on college was a local musician. She had a child without getting married, and then her partner disappeared when she was 5 months pregnant. For her parents, this was the greatest shame that damaged the family's honor. The phone rang, and Carol hesitated a moment before picking up the receiver. "Yes, Mom. I'm listening." Martha's voice was, as always, perfectly poised and refined. "I'm confirming your attendance at Rebecca's wedding. You'll bring Tommy, of course." "Yes, of course," Carol answered, gazing out the window. "We'd be fine with seats in an inconspicuous place. It's Rebecca's special day, and I don't want to get in the way." On the other end of the line, Martha sighed. "Don't say that. Your family. But, you will come properly dressed. Not like at Christmas." Her words trailed off, but their meaning was clear. Carol closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "It's all right, Mom. Don't worry. Please tell Rebecca congratulations." After hanging up, she returned to the table. Tommy had started his homework. The hair falling across his forehead warmed Carol's heart. No matter how difficult things got, having this child gave her the strength to keep going every day. "Mom, are we going to the wedding?" Tommy looked up and asked. "If you don't want to go, we don't have to." Carol was surprised by her son's wisdom. At just 6 years old, he was already sensing the complex family dynamics. "We'll go, Tommy. It's a celebration for Aunt Rebecca. And," she added after thinking a bit, "family is family, no matter what. Even if we're apart." Tommy nodded, but questions lingered in his eyes. "Then let's wear nice clothes." I've learned how to tie a necktie. Carol smiled. Yes. Let's dress up as best we can. A modest night spent together in this small apartment. Outside, snow continued to pile up, and the city lights shone through the window. On the morning of the wedding day, Carol woke up an hour earlier than usual. The soft daylight streaming through the bedroom window seemed a bit brighter than usual, as if nature itself was celebrating the beginning of this special day. She lay in bed for a while, organizing the flow of the day in her mind. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Carol went to the closet and took out a pale blue dress she had purchased with money she had been saving up for 3 months. It wasn't expensive, but it matched her skin tone and had a simple yet elegant look. As she touched it gently, she stood in front of the mirror and held the dress against her body. She wanted to at least not embarrass her family today. "Mom, are you up?" Tommy's voice came from the bedroom door. Carol turned around and smiled at her son, whose face was peeking through the door. His eyes held a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Good morning, Tommy. Did you sleep well?" "Yeah. Today is Aunt's wedding, right?" "I'm already ready," Tommy said confidently. He was already wearing a dress shirt and trying to wrap a slightly oversized necktie around his neck. Carol's heart warmed at the sight of her son. This child was her pride, no matter what. "Wait, let me tie that nice necktie for you." After breakfast, Carol headed to the dining table and spread out colorful construction paper and marker pens she had prepared. Tommy sat next to her, and they began making a heartfelt wedding card together. "What message should we write?" Carol asked Tommy. "Let's write, 'Congratulations, Aunt Rebecca. Be happy.'" Carol nodded at her son's pure words. She carefully wrote the message on the card, and Tommy added flowers and what looked like the bride and groom. It was an awkward but loving drawing. "This isn't my only gift." Carol took out a small box. Inside was a silver bracelet that had been passed down from her grandmother to her mother, and then to her. "You're giving Grandma's keepsake bracelet to Aunt Rebecca?" Tommy asked in surprise. "Yes. Family heirlooms should be passed down to the next generation," Carol answered quietly. The bracelet was one of her few precious treasures, but she hoped it would serve as a bridge to mend her relationship with her sister. Around 11 o'clock, Carol and Tommy left the apartment. They took a bus to the upscale hotel in the city. As the scenery outside the bus window changed, Carol's nervousness grew. Tommy was absorbed in the scenery outside, but occasionally looked up to check his mother's expression. "Mom, are you okay?" Carol forced a smile and held her son's small hand. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a little nervous." "I'm a little nervous too. But I'll be okay because you're with me." At those words, Carol felt her eyes well up. No matter the situation, this child would be by her side. That was enough. When they arrived at the hotel entrance, many guests had already gathered. Luxury cars pulled up one after another in front of the entrance, and well-dressed people stepped out. Carol got off the bus, took a deep breath, and stepped into the luxurious lobby of the hotel. "Carol. It's been a while." Turning around, she saw Sarah, Rebecca's high school friend, waving at her. Carol smiled back and walked towards Sarah, leading Tommy by the hand. "Sarah, how have you been?" "I'm doing great." "Is this Tommy?" "He's grown so much." Sarah bent down to Tommy's eye level and introduced herself. "Hello, Tommy. I'm your mom's friend from high school." Tommy shyly replied, "Hello." Sarah continued to Carol, "Your mom and dad are checking on the ceremony preparations. Rebecca is in the changing room. Everyone's so busy." Carol nodded. Despite the long time since they'd last met, Sarah welcomed her warmly. She felt a bit more at ease, but that was short-lived. "Carol." At the cold voice, she froze. Turning around, there stood Martha Hamilton, dressed in perfect makeup and an expensive dress. Her expression was stern, and her eyes looked Carol up and down as if appraising her. "Good morning, Mom," Carol greeted calmly. Martha just nodded slightly and immediately turned her attention to Tommy. "Tommy, you've grown." Tommy stood up straight and politely greeted, "Hello, Grandma." Martha smiled slightly, but quickly regained her composure. "The ceremony will start soon. It's time to be seated. Your seats are." She hesitated, looking around a bit perplexed. "They're prepared at the back on the left side, near Rebecca's friends." Carol said nothing, but the meaning was clear. They were placed near the friends section, not with the family. Martha was about to say something when a voice came from the opposite side of the lobby. "Mom! A button came off my dress. Hurry!" At Rebecca's voice, Martha immediately turned around and responded, "I'm coming." She left in a hurry without even saying, "See you," to Carol and Tommy. Sarah looked at Carol apologetically. "I'm sorry, that's just like always." Carol shrugged. "It's okay. I'm used to it." On their way to the ceremony hall, they also ran into Carol's father, George. He stood there in his expensive suit, full of dignity. His expression softened a bit when he saw Tommy, but he only offered a formal greeting to Carol. "This is a present for Rebecca. Could you give it to her later?" Carol held out the handmade card and the small jewelry box. George took them and just nodded silently. When they entered the ceremony hall, indeed, their seats were prepared at the back on the left side. Carol led Tommy and quietly sat down. Tommy looked around the venue with a nervous expression. "Mom, everyone's wearing such beautiful clothes." Carol smiled. "Yes, because today is a special day." Before the ceremony began, Tommy suddenly stood up. "Mom, I want to give the picture I drew to Aunt Rebecca myself." Carol hesitated, but seeing her son's serious expression, replied, "All right, let's go see." They headed toward the preparation room and knocked on the door. Rebecca herself opened it, and there stood her sister in a wedding dress. She was perfectly beautiful, like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Rebecca, you look truly beautiful," Carol said sincerely. Rebecca looked at her sister with a slightly surprised expression, then put on a formal smile. "Carol, you came. Thank you. Aunt, this is for you." Tommy held out the picture he had drawn. It was Rebecca and Michael drawn by a child's hand, with the word, "Congratulations," written in large letters. Rebecca glanced at the picture and said, "Oh, thank you. But I'm busy right now," and placed the picture on a nearby table. She immediately turned back to her mother, saying, "Mom, adjust my veil." Carol and Tommy's presence seemed to be forgotten in an instant. The two quietly left the room. "Mom, Aunt didn't seem to like my picture," Tommy said sadly. Carol hugged her son and comforted him, "That's not true. She's just busy right now. Your picture was wonderful. But she just put it down. It's okay. Let's make it our own treasure." Carol smiled gently. "Tommy, no matter what happens, your feelings are what matter. Your caring heart is your most wonderful quality." Tommy brightened a little and nodded slightly. The two returned to the ceremony hall and quietly took their seats. The ceremony was conducted solemnly, and Rebecca and Michael exchanged vows with radiant faces. Carol quietly watched the ceremony, sincerely wishing happiness for her sister. She tried to hold only pure feelings of blessing, not anger or jealousy. Tommy sat next to his mother, straightening his back, trying to behave like an adult. The reception was held in a luxurious ballroom at the same hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light from the ceiling, and the tables were beautifully decorated with floral arrangements. Carol and Tommy's seats were, again, at the edge of the room, the farthest from the bride and groom's table. "Mom, when will they serve the cake?" Tommy asked in a small voice. Carol smiled and replied, "You'll have to be patient a little longer. First, there's dinner and speeches." The dishes were served one after another, and the reception proceeded in a pleasant atmosphere. The people sitting around Carol didn't know her. When she introduced herself, they often responded with surprised looks, saying, "Oh, the bride's sister." They had expressions that suggested they had heard rumors but were meeting her for the first time. After the meal, when the wedding cake was cut, the MC with a microphone announced, "Now, let's hear speeches from the friends and family of the bride and groom." The parents stood up first and proudly spoke about Rebecca's growth. Carol's name wasn't even mentioned, but that was expected. Then the groom's parents and friends each offered warm words. Laughter and applause echoed through the venue, and the atmosphere was filled with blessings. And at the end of the speeches, Rebecca herself took the microphone. "Everyone, thank you so much for celebrating our new beginning today." Her voice was clear and reached every corner of the venue. Carol secretly felt proud of her sister's confident appearance. "Today, I was able to marry the most wonderful man. Michael, I'm so glad I met you." After declaring her love for the groom, Rebecca raised her glass and continued, "And I deeply thank my parents who raised and supported me until today." Carol quietly applauded. The speech should have ended there. But suddenly, Rebecca pointed to Carol at the edge of the room. "And we have a special guest today. My sister, Carol." All eyes in the venue turned to Carol. She froze, not expecting Rebecca to call her name in this setting. Tommy sensed his mother's change and anxiously grabbed her arm. Rebecca continued with a smiling face, "Actually, I've always thought this since I was a child. I worked desperately hard not to become like my sister." Chuckles began to spread through the venue. Carol's face grew hot. Because she's the perfect trifecta: poor, a single mother, and plain-looking. Rebecca laughed out loud, and loud laughter erupted from the venue. Tommy squeezed his mother's hand tightly. "And she even has a useless son." The word stabbed Carol's chest like a blade. She felt as if the room was darkening. It was as if all the blood was draining from her face. She tried to stand up, but her legs trembled and had no strength. The atmosphere in the venue momentarily froze. The laughter died down, and an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. Rebecca, sensing the situation, quickly added, "I'm joking, just joking." At that moment, Martha Hamilton raised her voice while holding a wine glass, "It's a joke, don't take it seriously." That's so like Rebecca. George was also nodding and laughing. Seeing this, laughter leaked from the venue again. Carol, blushing and fighting back tears, tried to force a smile. "I'll step out," she said in a small voice, trying to stand up. But then she realized her son's hand had already left her arm. Tommy was already standing, walking straight toward the front with a straight back. "Tommy!" Carol called out in a small voice, but his feet didn't stop. As the venue fell silent, the 6-year-old boy was boldly heading toward the bride and groom's table. Rebecca stood frozen with a surprised expression, microphone in hand. Tommy stopped in front of her and announced in a small voice, "I want to say some congratulatory words too." The venue was completely silent. Carol held her breath, unable to move. Michael leaned forward from beside Rebecca with a smile and handed the microphone to Tommy. Rebecca had a confused expression but couldn't say anything against her groom's kindness. Holding the microphone in his small hands, Tommy looked around the entire venue, then at his mother. When their eyes met, a look of determination appeared on his face. "My mom works 3 jobs every day." Tommy's voice was trembling at first but gradually grew stronger. "She works at a company in the morning, on her computer at night, and at the supermarket register on weekends. So I can go to school and eat delicious food." The venue buzzed. Carol, watching her son's small back, felt pride and love so strong it hurt her chest. "Even when Mom works late into the night, she always wakes me up with a smile in the morning. When I had a fever, she took time off from work and stayed by my side the whole time." Tommy's words were pure and straightforward. Tears glistened in his eyes. Grandpa, Grandma, and Aunt always make Mom sad. But Mom taught me that it's important to forgive people. Mom is very strong. The sound of sniffling began to be heard from around the venue. Rebecca had turned pale, and her parents were frozen. Aunt's money came from getting married, but Mom's love is something she gives me every day. I want to be like Mom. Because Mom is the kindest, strongest, and most amazing mom in the world. Tommy concluded with a small, deep bow. Congratulations, Aunt Rebecca. I hope you become a kind person like Mom. The venue was wrapped in complete silence. And then suddenly, one woman stood up and began to applaud. It was Sarah. Then 2, 3 people joined in applauding, and soon the entire venue was enveloped in warm applause. Many guests stood up and applauded while wiping away tears. Everyone had been moved by Tommy's pure and powerful words of love. Rebecca tried to take back the microphone, but she seemed at a loss for words. Michael took the microphone from her and gently patted Tommy's shoulder. Thank you, Tommy. Your mother really is an amazing person. Tommy was about to return to Carol, but on his way, Martha stopped him. There were tears in her eyes. George had also stood up and was standing next to his wife. Carol could finally move her body and hurried to her son. When Tommy came into her view, she couldn't stop the tears she had been holding back. Tommy. Her son turned toward his mother and flashed a full smile. As if to say, it's okay. Carol hugged Tommy and whispered, "Thank you," in his ear. Then she looked toward her parents and Rebecca. In her eyes, there was no longer fear, shame, or anger. After Tommy returned to his mother and Carol embraced her son, a heavy atmosphere hung over the venue. Rebecca blushed, and Michael placed his hand on his wife's shoulder with a confused expression. Martha and George stood frozen. The MC tried to break the tension by announcing, "Now, let's move on to the dance time," and the band began to play. People slowly began to resume their conversations, but the heaviness in the air didn't completely dissipate. Carol took a deep breath and took Tommy's hand. "Shall we go?" she said in a small voice. She was worried that staying any longer might ruin the newlywed special day. However, before Tommy could answer, a woman approached their table. When Carol looked up, it was someone who introduced herself as Rebecca's colleague. "Carol Hamilton," the woman called out with a gentle expression. "My name is Emily Clark. I work with Rebecca." Carol smiled politely. "Hello, Emily. I was moved by your child's speech," Emily said with a sincere expression. "Actually, I'm also raising a child alone. Like you." Her words didn't continue. Instead, she stood up determinedly and began to applaud. "Ms. Hamilton, I believe everything your son said is true. As a single mother, I know how hard it is to raise a child." At those words, a man from another part of the venue also stood up. "I'm David Morris. Ms. Hamilton, you handle the accounting for my company. I'm grateful for your always accurate and prompt work. Your professionalism is nothing short of amazing." Carol was speechless with surprise. More and more people began to stand up, starting to tell truths about her. "I'm a colleague from Carol's accounting firm," another woman stood up. "She arrives earliest and leaves latest at the office. She works harder than anyone. She's an excellent accountant with thick trust from clients. I'm the manager of the supermarket where Carol works as a cashier on weekends," a middle-aged man said. "She always serves customers with a smile and handles complex tasks accurately. She's also contributing to increasing the store's sales." As more people stood up and spoke, the mood in the venue completely changed. The previous chuckles and cold gazes disappeared, replaced by expressions of respect and admiration. Sarah stood up and took the microphone. "I've been Carol's friend since high school. Let me tell you something you might not know. She smiled at Carol and continued, Carol was a top student in high school. She had even earned a full scholarship to college. But she postponed her education to help her sick grandmother. And even after her grandmother passed away, she chose to help with the family's real estate business. Carol closed her eyes. The past she had never talked about for a long time was now coming to light. And she attended night college and obtained her accountant qualification. All while balancing childcare and work, Sarah continued. Furthermore, she volunteers at the local support group for single mothers. Many women have been able to restart their careers with her help. Martha and George stood breathless. Their expressions showed surprise and shame at hearing episodes of their daughter's life for the first time. And an unexpected person took the microphone. It was the groom, Michael. It may seem strange for me to say something about my sister-in-law whom I've just met, he began with a serious expression. However, my company always values partnership. And today, I witnessed an example of a wonderful partnership. Michael smiled at Tommy and Carol. The partnership between mother and son. A relationship of mutual respect and protection. This is what I want to build in my marriage with Rebecca. He looked at Rebecca. She was blushing and looking down. Miss Carol, Tommy, I'm proud to have such a wonderful sister-in-law and nephew. At Michael's words, loud applause broke out from the venue. Carol was dazed. The true image of her, who had been looked down upon by her family for years and only known to others as the troubled sister, was now shining in front of many people. George approached Carol's table with uncertain steps. Unable to look directly into his daughter's eyes, he said while fidgeting with his hands, Carol, I didn't know. Carol looked up at her father's face. Instead of feeling anger or resentment, she strangely felt her heart lighten. Dad, I've always been right here. Martha also approached and knelt before Tommy. We've been terrible grandparents, haven't we? Her voice was trembling. Can you forgive us? Tommy thought for a moment, then answered, Mom said, forgiveness is important, and timidly hugged his grandmother. Tears welled up in Martha's eyes. Rebecca still remained seated at the table with the groom, seemingly unable to look toward Carol. Carol, strangely enough, didn't feel like blaming her. It was just a sense of complex emotions from all these years being released. Carol took Tommy's hand and slowly walked toward her sister's table. Standing in front of Rebecca, she quietly said, Congratulations, Rebecca. Be happy. Rebecca looked up and met her sister's eyes. Her eyes were brimming with tears. Carol, I'm sorry. I really said terrible things. Without waiting for her words, Carol took out the small box containing the bracelet inherited from her grandmother and placed it on the table. This is my gift to you. It's a family treasure. Rebecca opened the box and gasped at the bracelet inside. But this is It's your turn to wear it now, Carol smiled. Michael gently encouraged Rebecca, and she stood up and hugged her sister. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. She repeated. At this moment, Carol was able to take pride in her life and choices in front of her family for the first time. She looked down at Tommy and smiled. His pure courage had brought about this moment. Tommy, shall we go home? Carol said to her son. Already? But I haven't had cake yet, Tommy said a bit disappointedly. This comment brought laughter from the venue. Michael stood up and said, Let's prepare a special cake for Tommy, and called a waiter. That night, Carol and Tommy returned home feeling liberated from a long-standing burden. Tonight, they had been recognized and accepted for who they truly were. 3 months later, one morning, gentle autumn sunshine streamed into Carol's apartment. The sweet scent of pancakes wafted from the kitchen, and flowers adorned a small table in the living room. Mom, Grandpa and Grandma are coming soon, right? Tommy, wearing a new sweater, was peering out the window. Yes, in about 10 minutes, I think, Carol answered while plating the pancakes. Since the wedding day, her life had been changing bit by bit. Her efforts at the accounting firm had been recognized, and she had been promoted to a management position. Weekend part-time work was no longer necessary, and she had more time to spend with Tommy. He had made more friends at his new school and was growing up brighter and more energetic than before. "Sister, can I help?" Martha's voice came from the kitchen door. She had arrived a bit early with her husband. Carol turned around and smiled at the sight of her mother. "Thank you, Mom. It's all ready. The table is already set." George waved to Tommy, and when his grandson ran to him, he lifted him high. "Oh, you've grown again. What grade are you in now?" "Still first grade, Grandpa." Tommy answered with a laugh. In the past 3 months, Martha and George had begun to genuinely engage with their grandson. They visited Carol's home every weekend, and sometimes invited Tommy to their home to spend time together. The parents, who had apologized for years of misunderstanding and neglect, were deepening their relationship with their grandson as if to make up for lost time. "Have you heard from Rebecca?" Carol asked while arranging the plates. Martha's expression clouded a bit. "Yes, there seems to be some issues between her and Michael. Rebecca was experiencing unexpected difficulties in married life. She, who had always depended on her parents and those around her, was now facing the meaning and challenges of independence for the first time. She'll find her way eventually," Carol said quietly. "Everyone needs time to grow." George nodded appreciatively at his daughter's words. "Carol, you've really become strong." She smiled. "I haven't become strong, I've just learned to live true to myself." After the meal, Carol suggested taking a family photo. Everyone gathered on the living room sofa, and she set the camera timer. "Say cheese." The flash went off, and 4 smiling faces were captured in one photograph. It was the image of a family being rebuilt, imperfect as it was. Carol had told her parents that trust can't be built in a day, and yet they had begun walking the path of repairing their relationship, little by little, for Tommy's sake. What is a true family? What is happiness? The answer isn't singular, it's something each person must find for themselves. Carol thought quietly as she gently stroked Tommy's head. In this moment, she could finally take pride in her life and choices with all her heart.